Hey, how's it going, folks? Welcome back to another episode of RPM. That's the Red Peace Machine. I'm joined once again by Roy War, Banefshe, Susie Sheeler, and Ramesh. Thanks for tuning in. How's everybody doing? We want to start with go with Ramesh. How you doing?
Doing well, trying hard to avoid the heat as best as possible and still maintain my sanity by being in outdoor spaces.
Dang, I hear that. Yeah, yesterday was massively hot. And Susie?
We've only just begun. I'm fine. I'm doing well. Um, you know, all said, I'm happy Biden's our president.
And Roy and Banefshe.
Doing good. Spending this week with my cousin. Really happy about that. Life is good.
Same.
Oh yeah, that's your new thing, right? Same.
Same.
Ditto. Same.
Same.
Man. Yeah. So this is a Father's Day weekend.
That's right.
Yeah. Anyone tributes to their fathers?
Happy Father's Day, Roy.
You too. Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day, fellas.
Today is finally the real Juneteenth, right?
No, that was yesterday.
Yeah.
Was it yesterday?
Yeah. Happy belated Juneteenth.
Oh, wait,
Yeah,
Exactly.
that too.
we get off
exactly.
Friday for the Saturday Juneteenth?
No, I'm assuming we get off Mondays, right?
Is it Monday?
How are they going to do this?
We got off the Friday before.
Oh, we did?
Yeah.
My
Okay.
brother-
Yeah.
Friday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think they called it that day, and then you're off that day. They called it
Right.
or something
Y'all
like
can
that.
all go
Yeah.
home.
In
at
Germany,
I
they
think
4:30.
that's
do
what
that.
happened.
So, like, the
Yeah.
holiday lands on a Wednesday, that's the day you're off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then so I took off too because like my wife was in San Antonio, and then like our job was like, yeah, it's gonna be a floating holiday, and then they ended up making it national, so it was like it's cool, yeah. So it worked out for me, yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So does
And I'm
this
like,
this is their way of getting, I mean, I'm happy about this, but I'm going back to the tweet that Cory Bush did with the Happy Juneteenth and reparations. Happy Juneteenth.
yeah, exactly. To me, it's a holiday I've been taking off from work anyway. You know what I mean?
Good.
Every year I'll put I take off and say out of office due to Juneteenth. Please, I'll put a link in my out of office, so like when people they find out more information about it. And so for them to
Nice.
like make it a federal holiday, yay, that's good. But like there's still people who are in the service industry who don't get this day off. You know what I mean? We still need reparations. I think we still need police reform. We still need so many things. We need people who are locked up because of the drug war that are Black to be released immediately. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't want
For
4 years to
one
come.
joint.
Yeah. Reparations. I don't want 4 years to come with Biden and Harris, and they'll be like, remember when we made it that holiday? No, yeah, that's all you did though for us.
But that's
Well-
the American way.
Yeah.
It's symbolic. It's just symbolic.
It's symbolic. Like, we've had a MLK Day for how many years? Who cares?
Yeah, exactly.
Tear down the statues, but don't change any institutions.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
It's the American way.
Did you hear Great Britain? The UK has made it, well, not the UK, Britain has made it illegal to tear down any more statues. Like, I thought it was already illegal first to do that. It's public property. But now you have to go through all of this bullshit to petition to get it down. And the idea is they're going to make it so difficult that, you can't do it.
My understanding of that is it's not for the public, it's for the institution. So you're
Right.
a building and you have a statue out front, and you decided that statue needs to go, then you're gonna have to do these hoop jumping events to get rid of your own statue.
Yeah.
Your own statue.
I mean,
I'd like to. I have this great statue. Can I get rid of it? No. Yeah, it must be a historical home thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just a lot of bullshit, if you ask me. I don't understand. I don't understand it. Why keep a symbol of oppression?
So when the Roman Empire became officially Christian, in the 4th century AD. So not, like Constantine legalized it. I don't remember the Roman emperor's name automatically offhand that made it the official religion. And then Emperor Theodosius made it the only religion. And all of that happened within about 8 decades. It went from legal to this is the only legal religion. When that happened, they went crazy and they began melting all the statues of Roman emperors who weren't Christian and destroying all the. So if you go to Egypt and you're walking in some of the temples, the temples have been vandalized. That was the Christian Romans destroying all the artwork in the temples because they didn't want any pre-Christian thing. So there's this history of erasing the past, but erasing the past doesn't change the present. It doesn't change the past. It doesn't make for a better future. What changes the present and what changes the future is actual changes to the institutions, and the fact,
or at least changing the narrative, right?
Changing the narrative. Talk about
what happened in history.
So, like, instead of
but if we're
Columbus as an explorer, we talk about him as a conquistador, which is exactly only what he was.
Which in that case makes it important that we learn the past. I mean, you can say it's not important. It doesn't, past is important, future is important, it's right now. But I think everything that we did is, if we don't teach that, and I know you feel the same way, I might have been me misunderstanding, but we have to teach it. We have to keep that so present in people's minds. And this critical race theory thing is just, boggles my fucking mind. What in God's name? I mean, we already made the Trail of Tears a sort of, hey, then there was that, I mean, are we just gonna wipe away everything that we ever did wrong? Because that doesn't even jibe with other countries. I mean, when people will, like Australia, they come in and then they get rid of the indigenous people. It's what happens or happened. And so we have to learn that so that we do not do it again, right?
It's still happening, Palestine.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So, I mean,
Kashmir and India, East Turkestan, which is, I can't remember the Chinese name for it, where the Uyghurs live.
Xinjiang.
Oh,
Xinjiang, yeah. In China. I mean, this is an ongoing process. The Russians are still doing ethnic cleansing and genocide in Siberia and Russifying it. The United States isn't done. I mean, we
oh no, not at all. But
like,
the less we learn.
Genocide is a lot of work. It's very hard. And just to jump onto my Columbus statement so that we take it to the actual proper step, Columbus was an explorer in the same way Hitler was an explorer. So Columbus discovered the Americas and Native Americans. Hitler discovered Poland and the Ukraine and the Jews.
Interesting.
What happened there.
Interesting.
Big discovery moment.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. I always wondered who discovered the Jews.
Yeah, it was Hitler. He discovered them.
He found them and then was like, nope.
He also discovered the Roma and Ukrainians and Poles. He was a really big explorer. He really.
Yeah. He explored a lot.
He explored a lot. Like Julius Caesar, he was an explorer too. He explored the French.
So this kind of leads in well with the topic of the day, which is nation states that, or just general politics, having turned, as it applies to nation states, having turned from being self-interested into damaging, or maybe perhaps always it has been. It comes to you, it presents itself to you as self-interest, right? But in the end, it's really just ruining that country and the globe in general.
So would you say that's the same thing as what the legislature did?
Well, I was going to wrap this whole thing up in saying that the US, I'm going to juxtapose this backlash against critical race theory and the possibility of actually, instead of just, okay, make Juneteenth a national holiday, but go further. At least say something about, say what Cori Bush said and say, okay, this is going to be our first step. Have a plan, make some promises, make more promises, do structural change, do something as opposed to window dressing, right? So here we have this window dressing in juxtaposition to backlash against critical race theory, which is already there's an undercurrent of let's actually talk about the history. Let's talk about structural change. Let's talk about structural racism. Let's talk about the reality. Let's talk about some truths. Let's put it down on the table. Already the undercurrent, and they all know it. People in power all know this. They're tuned in, right? And the backlash is, no, this is just telling whites we're bad. We're not good enough. We need to hate ourselves. This is the backlash. This is what the backlash is about.
Right.
And then the concession as far as the Democratic Party goes is, okay, all right, we're just going to make it a national holiday.
But it was an easy thing to do because it's a state holiday in 49 states.
Mm-hmm.
So Texas, the state that said no more critical race theory in the classroom, already had Juneteenth as a holiday. It was one of the Dakotas, I don't remember which one, doesn't matter, that didn't have it as a state holiday. So, you know, Mississippi had it as a state holiday. Alabama had it as a state. Who cares? Had it? You know what I mean? If it was one state had passed it and the federal government came in and did it, then that would have been interesting and revolutionary.
I just want to point out, we are celebrating the end of slavery. That's what we're celebrating.
Not just the end of slavery. I mean, to me,
and telling the slaves that
like this is
that's exactly what I was about to say is, my God, not only was it the end of slavery, but they didn't even tell Texas until, I mean, the Texas slaves that and for 2 extra years. I mean, what was that? How was that even legal?
But also there's the whole thing of, and then where's the conversation about the start of Jim Crow?
Yeah.
So, you know, like I worked on a plantation near Houston, and
wait, please describe what you mean by worked on a plantation.
Yeah, that's I think that needs a little bit of fleshing out.
A crawl, and we were doing a dig. Thank you. It was an archaeological dig. We were doing an archaeological dig.
Totally different.
In the past lives or something.
No. Sorry. I should have clarified. In the 90s, they were doing a dig on a plantation, and as a college student, I got to volunteer. And what you did was you took a trawl and you scraped 1/10 of an inch off at a time. Why?
Oh my God.
Why not be metric? Why are you doing 1/10 of an inch? That's not a real thing. It's 1/8 of an inch. Anyway,
that's not a real thing.
We don't get material measurements. So, and then what you would do is you would sift it. And I was, just for the record, I was assigned a place where they almost certainly knew nothing would be found because it was the control spot, right? So I kept finding like bits of glass and rusted nails and stuff. I was really disappointed. But the reason why this was such an amazing, perfect plantation to dig is the Civil War ends, 2.5 years, because it's in Texas. The slaves didn't know that the Civil War had ended and they were free. And then when they found out, the white family fled and the slaves took over the plantation and were running it themselves. And I actually think they left the main house empty because they couldn't figure out how they were going. So they lived in the shanty part of the
okay,
because they didn't know how to assign people to live in the master's house. And then in 1876, Reconstruction is abruptly ended so that Louisiana, Florida, and South Carolina can magically vote Republican, even though 16 years earlier they had left the country, they left the United States because they didn't like a Republican winning the office. And Jim Crow ends. That, I believe it was the same year, it might have been the next year, the white family shows up with rifles and drives the slaves off the plantation and recaptures the plantation. So basically 1876 gets frozen in time because there's nobody living in the slave quarters. And as the wood shanties collapse into the ground, everything got preserved. So it's this,
oh wow,
that was absolutely, and you know, so we're celebrating Juneteenth, which happens in, is it 1867 or 1868? But there's no recognition of what happened in 1876. Like we need to have, we do the contrast. We have MLK Day and we have Columbus Day. Like at some point, maybe we could have Gandhi Day and Hitler Day too. You know what I mean? Like we obviously
according to Marjorie Taylor Greene, that would be just fine.
That would be just fine. So we
She's-
already do a yin yang thing. Well, why don't we acknowledge these things in our system anyway?
They actually, I went to the unveiling of the Juneteenth memorial statue at the Capitol. I think it was in 2017. And that was my first experience where I was actually scared to be in a crowd. There were a whole lot of people who'd come just to, you know, experience it. And then there were a shit ton of white nationalists there, and they all had bandanas on, you know, and they're getting, you know, closer and closer to us. And I don't know what happened, but somebody from behind just started pushing all of us. And so we were being forced towards the white nationalists. And this is just right on, you know, right in front of the Capitol. And these cops had to come through on horses to separate us. And I mean, it was terrifying to me. I know it doesn't sound horrible or anything, but I've never been in a crowd that, now I know what Black Friday must be on a, you know, after Thanksgiving at certain, I don't know. It was crazy. I thought I was going to get trampled. I really did. I was terrified. I turned around and went the other way, but it's a really beautiful memorial. And they did talk about it. I don't know if it's inscribed on there, but they did talk about the fact when they were dedicating it that we didn't say anything until 2.5 years after. So somebody recognized it, but, you know, not globally. I mean, not nationally, obviously. So that, all of that said, with governments not wanting something and just leaving, Texas has done that a couple of times. Are there any other legislatures who have done that? Who've just left because they don't like the outcome, or they don't want to vote on a bill? Like just now we had SB 7 come up in Texas, which would have put us with all those other states like Florida and I don't know, Arizona, with the voter restriction laws becoming very, very, very strict, much stricter. And the Democrats here didn't want to vote on it, so they left town. And they've done that at least one other time that I remember. So they don't have to vote on it, right? Which means that they can't advance it or put it on Abbott's desk.
Okay, teacher's gonna come in for a second. Building
Okay.
on what Susie just said, and maybe going in that direction. I just wanted us to lay sort of a track for where we're going in this episode. And we just kind of set up a distinction between two paths that a nation state, specifically United States, could be taking, these two different tracks around racial equity, for instance. What is the topic of today, Roy? What are we talking about? Generally speaking.
You were going to tell a story, yeah, and then you were going to tell a story, I think.
Yeah, and then let's go with this. Ramesh, do you remember what we were going to talk about?
Yeah, let's see how we can transition. So like when Texas did this,
your voice is really soft, Ramesh, compared to.
Hello? Not better? No.
Not so much.
Can you put the mic in your mouth?
Hello?
Yeah, that's
Oh, there you,
better.
yeah.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Yeah, so when Texas heard the news, knew that slavery was abolished, and then purposefully waited that extra period of time, that was Texas acting in a very rational way. They had this system, this mechanism of labor extraction set up in place, with tons and tons invested into it. There would have been losses for the business owners, all of this stuff. And so Texas acted in a very rational way for the state, for its economy, for the interests that it represented in trying to preserve slavery as long as humanely possible. Something different is going on today, where the Texas legislature is not acting in a self-interested way at points in time, where the United States is often not acting in self-interested ways. So, right, we work off this assumption that states, even when they behave in terrible ways, are at least acting self-interestedly in advancing someone's, interests. what's going on with the legislature today, where it is not doing that, where it is not acting entirely rationally?
Okay, so there's two things going on. One is the question Susie brought up, which is the part of the legislature basically fleeing to prevent a vote. And then the other thing is when the legislature is acting in ways that are irrational. So let's start with that, and then we can go back and talk about Susie's Democrat running event. Here's the way I'm looking at it. So right now, Texas is about 40.5% white and about 40.5% Latinx. In other words, we're right about the point where both populations are equal in Texas. There's no majority in Texas. There hasn't been a majority in Texas for, I think it's almost 2 decades now. I want to say it flipped sometime around like 2005, 2004.
And then what's the difference between a majority and a plurality?
So a plurality is whoever's in first place. And technically right now, whites probably are. The reason I'm saying probably is because we just did a census, but we haven't gotten the census data yet. We won't get it until October. So we don't actually know the demographics for a place like Texas. We can guess. And right now the guess is that whites are technically the plurality. Majority means 50% and one or more people. So if I have 1 million people, a majority is 500,001 people. People will often say 51%. That is way more than a majority, right? Because in the case of 1 million people, that would be 9,999 people more than you need. So right now, whites are probably the plurality, but with a razor thin population. Most demographers believe that this year or next year, the Latinx population will exceed the white population and they will become the plurality and whites will fall to second place. This is also a state with a huge burgeoning Asian population as well. So it's not merely a Latinx versus white. And then of course we're 13.5% Black, right? So I think Texas is about 7% Asian, 13.5% Black. And so, by the time we're done, whites are a significant chunk of the population, but diminishing. By 2050, it's got to be sooner than that. But anyway, no later than 2050, the Latinx population will be the majority in Texas. So one of the things that I think a rational person would want to think about is if we're in charge, we're running the state, and we're a minority, and everybody's a minority, but soon we will become such a small minority that one of the minority populations is going to become the majority. They might want vengeance on us. And now would be a great time to, through the constitutional amendments, pass every minority protection bill imaginable. Instead, what is Texas doing? It's trying to create more voter suppression. It's banning the conversation of race. What happens when critical race theory is talking about white oppression because the majority Latinx population is abusing the white population? Like, why would you ban that now? I could see why you would have banned that 125 years ago because you were trying to maintain some sort of myth about white power, but now is exactly the wrong time to be acting in this way. And so it looks like pure irrationality. You don't want to establish Jim Crow moments before you become an oppressed minority. So
yeah, I think just to be a minority though doesn't necessarily mean to be an oppressed minority, right? We can have ruling minorities with historical power, all of this other stuff. And
for sure, I think that's one of the things that's going through in the calculation with this white population in Texas is we'll just be like apartheid South Africa.
Exactly right.
That's it. What they're thinking is we'll just be like Israel. We'll just pull off this minority oppression system,
which brings us to the gun crazed culture. This is all kind of in step with a greater idea of but here's dominating by all means.
But here's the irrationality of that. In apartheid South Africa, they didn't have that gun culture because they knew if they did, the black population would be armed and would murder the white population to take over. why would you pass an irrational law like that that now allows the Latinx population to open carry without a license or any procedure to eliminate? What people forget is in the 60s, it was the NRA that wanted gun control and gun regulation because they wanted to keep the firearms out of the hands of Black activists. And
But then money.
right.
Yeah.
But this is irrational. It's thinking that, oh, I'm going to make short-term profit now, but then there's going to be a violent revolution down the road because I've armed the people that I've been oppressing. That's really
Well,
stupid.
So a couple.
Isn't that what Republicans do though?
That they're stupid.
No, well, yeah, no, they're like the grasshopper from the ant and the grasshopper,
Yeah.
right? I mean, they're like now, and we're all about what about later? What about later?
So do we know what gun ownership in Black culture is like first? And second, what the whites' perception of that culture is?
I don't know any numbers.
I do know.
but there are black clubs though. Yeah, I keep getting invited to one like almost every other month. Yeah, by a friend.
Austin Black Pride is actually having firearms training classes.
Mhm.
So that's something.
Yeah, there are also socialist and leftist groups that are getting together around gun activism.
Awesome.
Absolutely. I mean,
You have
one
to
of
be
the
able
things I
to
keep
protect-
saying is they think they're armed. We're just as armed as they are.
Yeah.
Only
I used to-
only
yeah.
how often do you think a minority is going to walk out of the door open carrying in Texas? I mean, you're
That's
just
what I was
asking to
gonna
get
say.
shot.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to me, yeah, that's how I've always thought about it. I was like, yeah, black gun ownership isn't the same as white gun ownership because of that point. It's just like if we are registered and we have gone through the correct loopholes to do it, we're still gonna be looked at differently. Look at Philando Castile, right? He
Right.
did everything
Yeah.
right, did everything right, and he still got shot.
Yep.
So that always bothered me. I was
Mhm.
like, no, guns aren't for us. Then when I see the white militias
Yeah.
getting their guns and stuff, I'm like, okay,
White
yeah,
militia.
we gotta be armed. Whoever's willing to be armed, be armed. You know what I mean? But be safe.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
I'm totally with you. I mean, I think it's irrational at this point not to be armed.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It may not
And
be
that's
for me, but yeah.
how sad is that?
So
I'm sorry, we were driving along the road the other day, right? And there's this big picture for liposuction or something. And it's this beautiful woman who's got in a bathing suit, and she's gorgeous. And my aunt goes, why is her ass dimpled? And it was a bullet hole. Somebody had shot that sign with a bullet hole.
Oh.
Okay. I was like, what?
it was probably one of those radical leftist feminists.
Dang.
I was like, this is so perfect. This is so perfect. A bullet hole in that woman's ass.
That's funny.
Yeah.
One time I was driving by Elgin. This is totally unrelated except for the billboard. And it said, are you sure you're the father? You should get a D and
D
then
and-
ampersand and A test.
D and A test.
D and N.
That's like getting a DNC.
Oh, I'm going to go there.
Yeah.
They
What they're doing.
know what that N stands for.
Oh
One
my
thing
God.
coming back to like rally by state actors or whatever, when we had this QAnon stuff come up and we had Republican legislatures or elective members across the country sort of speak in support or echo theories or all of this stuff, there would be subsequent questions posed to them by like journalists that they're already interacting with, already had a relationship with, asking them like, this is crazy, why are you still parroting this? Like you live in the system, you know what's going on, you're friends with these folks, this is crazy, why are you still repeating this rhetoric in your public statements? And the answer given was that we are representative, so we are representing the concerns, the ideology, the baggage of our people, whatever it may be. Right? So there's this hiding behind representation, hiding behind representative democracy in that moment, but then at the same time, in a different moment, in an opposing move, limiting that and saying, well, we're not a democracy. This is a republic. We are supposed to be limiting and curtailing the worst impulses of the people as well. So you had the same figure saying these things on both opposing points, and I thought it was so interesting.
It
Well,
was.
that
It may
explains
be
Joe
that
Manchin.
it's popular democracy in India, popular democracy in the United States, popular democracy in Brazil that's leading to these sort of very irrational
I really
outcomes.
liked the answer that, what's the Arizona guy who left? Flake, of course. How can I forget Flake?
He flaked.
So Representative Flake, about 3 months ago.
Senator.
Senator
Yeah.
Flake, about 3 months ago, was asked the same question. And he said, what do you have to say to these representatives of the people who claim to be saying what they're saying, parroting what their constituents are, the lies their constituents are saying, and claiming that we know this is BS, but we have to represent them. We have to amplify their voices. This is what they want. We're going to give it to them, right? We are here to represent them. And he said, I think that is what is destroying the Republican Party.
Yeah.
And that there is a distinction between amplifying the voice of the people and amplifying lies. And we are here to be, because we are closer to the circles of power. We know how these lies are made. They are made to serve particular people. We have a responsibility to, like, here's a Republican who's basically laying it out and saying, we have a responsibility to out these lies.
Yeah.
And out it to the people, because we're right here. We know how they're made. We need to set the narrative. We need to create the truth. We need to, squash these lies and create alternative, just tell the truth.
But this is what they tried during the primary with Trump.
Lies. Like everything that we have is stolen, and everything that we say is a lie.
But what he didn't say, and he meant, in my mind, this what he was saying was he didn't say it, but what came to my mind was, these people this is just yet another story they are telling to cover their self-serving asses. So at the end of the day, they are not representing anything but their own self-interest.
And I totally agree with that.
Well, I don't know if I agree, though. I think it might be both, right? They are now thrown into this disgusting, putrid soup created
by them.
Yes.
And Reagan. And
yes.
Nixon.
Yeah. They've become cogs in a machine. They are now part
This
of
is, yeah.
Not extract themselves from.
And also, you should never believe your own lies. I mean, I think that's just politics rule 101. Lie, cheat, and steal. Just don't believe your own lies. And I think they've drunk the Kool-Aid. They drank.
Well, no, but what happens when you're competing in primaries with those who have believed their own lies, right? You have to step up as well and believe in that wholeheartedly.
So, but here's the problem. I think QAnon conspiracy is the natural end of the United States. By end, I both mean the termination of the United States, but I also mean like its ultimate goal, because think about it. We're Christian. We're about love and peace and generosity. We just stole this place from the Native Americans. We brought slaves over to do our work for us, and we're going to build a stolen empire on slave labor and stolen land. And somehow we're about love and peace and Christianity. The lie is so profound and it is so deep in the bones. And then to add to it, white people are just superior. And so you got a bunch of white people who have never worked a day in their life, who are living off the labor of others and stealing the land from others. And somehow they're superior. How do you make these lies make sense? And the only way you make old lies make sense is by telling yourself new lies. In other words, the United States is a lie Ponzi scheme. And how do you make capitalism make sense in a world where you believe in democracy and Christianity? It can't, because capitalism is predicated on the idea that I, as a rich person, should lie, cheat, and steal to take your hard-earned money from you so I can be even richer, even though what's the difference between $10 million worth of wealth and $1 billion worth of wealth? It has no impact on the quality of your life. All you've done is you've just stolen on a grand scale. And so it's like a monopoly game at that point. And then, the housing prices keep going through the roof. That's only sustainable as long as capitalism continues to create. As soon as capitalism flattens out, housing prices are going to collapse. And so that's a Ponzi scheme. Literally everything in the United States is a gigantic capitalist Ponzi scheme. And so to me, QAnon, wow, I can't believe this didn't happen earlier. And there'll be another lie as QAnon fizzles, because I don't know if you all remember, there was the whole birther and Tea Party movement, and then QAnon replaced that. There'll be another set of crazy that'll replace that. And we'll just keep doing this until A, we do a civil war, or B, we just collapse in our giant debt, our giant $28 trillion debt with no infrastructure. And we can't, Texas, the largest energy producer in the United States, the second largest energy producer on the planet, Texas can't provide electricity for its people in either the winter or the summer. Like, how did you end up there? That's a level of extraordinary insanity, incompetence.
I just want to do a little footnote, just a little footnote. We are the original folks who, not the original folks, but the folks who were settlers here, didn't bring slaves. They kidnapped folks, enslaved them, turned them into slaves. I just wanted to make that distinction. But
that's
yeah,
a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or they bought people who were kidnapped already.
Yes.
Yeah.
Human trafficking. It's just human trafficking. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to.
And then, yeah,
So
that's a funny thing too. All the Republicans who keep going, we need to have strong border security to stop human trafficking. You're talking about this? What the fuck?
Yeah.
You invented human trafficking. What the hell are you talking about? Damn you, Orwell. Son of a bitch.
Take me to another nation state and tell me about states behaving rationally or irrationally there. Do we want to go to Brazil next? Are we going to India? What's
I would like to talk about the Texans fleeing.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. So why don't I tell the story in 2003 and then link it to today? Although it's a little involved, but I'll try and cut as much fat as I can without taking away bone and muscle. All right, so what's worth pointing out is Texas is to democracy what the Soviet Union was to democracy. We are literally exactly in Texas as democratic as the Soviet Union ever was. There's one party. We are a one-party state. So from 1876 until 1994, we did have a Republican governor at one point. I'm not saying there were no Republicans, but
Democrat.
What? We were completely democratic.
Yeah.
Our state was 99% democratic in terms of elected officials. The state might not have been 99% Democrat, but the system we use to elect officials in the United States is single-member district representation. Although now, Maine has gone with ranked order voting. But honestly, all that is single-member district representation with runoff elections compressed into them. So it's no different in outcome than the Louisiana primary, which California and Washington also use. So there's 4 states that aren't doing this now. Whatever. So the reason why I say whatever is single-member district representation is one person represents the district. You could have multi-member district representation. You don't have to do single. And when you make it one person, it means whoever wins everything. And so what that does is it automatically crushes minority votes, whether it's religious minorities, ethnic minorities, political minorities, who cares? Single-member district representation automatically makes it so that whoever's in the majority will dominate politically. I'm setting all that up because when Texas was 15% Republican because the black population was Republican and 85% let's make it 20% Republican because 15% were black and there were probably a few white Republicans, and then 80% Democratic, it was still 99% Democrat in terms of elected officials. So
Also, when we say Republican, we mean Lincoln's Republican.
So there's no need to make that distinction because the Republican Party was founded as the big business party that was all about money, but it made a coalition with abolitionists and, by the way, suffragists at one point to try to expand its base. There's this myth in the United States that the Republicans and the Democrats switched places. That never happened. What happened was the Southern conservative wing of the Democratic Party, which was the core of the Democratic Party, defected. And I thought in part one of the things I'm talking about with my example of the Democrats fleeing the state, it defected and became Republican and then is now the core of the Republican Party. So it's not that the Democrats and Republicans switched places, it's that a chunk of the Democratic Party left the Democratic Party and became part of the Republican Party. So in 1994, something happened that was earthquake-like in Texas, and it was that Ann Richards was defeated by George Bush Jr. And that was earthquake-like because, first of all, Ann Richards is one of our most popular ever governors. She was brilliant. She was hilarious. Like, she had this glowing, charismatic personality. And here was running against her, this moron. He beats her. And it was this moment of why. And the why was, it was a single issue. It was gun control. She said she was in favor of background checks, and that cost her the election because all the bubbas went out and voted for our first MR governor. Anyway, so what ends up happening is in 1996, just 2 years later, the Texas Senate flips to the Republican Party. And the reason that's happening is because Southern Democrats who are conservative, who are Jim Crow racists, are slowly becoming Republicans, because that was what Reagan sort of introduced. That was part of the Reagan Revolution, was the Democratic Party is the liberal party and the Republican Party is the conservative party. That was never the case in the United States. The Democratic Party was the liberal and the conservative party. The Republican Party was the populist and libertarian parties. And so all of a sudden there's this reconfiguration where all these Southern Democrats are going, I don't know how this happened, Sally Mae, but I'm in the wrong party. And they began switching.
Sally Mae.
So then 1998 rolls along, and the lieutenant governorship in Texas, which is elected separately from the governor, flips Republican, because under George Bush Jr.'s first 4-year term, he had a Democratic lieutenant governor, and a bunch of the Texas executive positions went Republican in 98. So in other words, Texas went from being solidly blue in 92 to being pretty much purple in 96. I mean, it's 4 years to being purple with a red tint in 98. 2000 rolls along, and nothing changes. The Democrats still own the House. The executive is Republican. The Senate is Republican. But there is a law. The way districting is done in Texas, it's in the Constitution, is if the Senate and the House can't agree to a map, a 5-person commission kicks in. So the Senate intentionally refused to work with the House to create a map to district Texas, because what they wanted to do was create a gerrymandered map that would flip the Texas House red. And so it went to the 5-person commission, 4 of whom were Republicans. They created a gerrymandered map in 2001 that then applied to 2002. The Texas House flipped, and now the state went completely red. In other words, I know most of you believe Texas has been Republican since God created the earth 5,000 years ago, but it only became Republican 19 years ago.
How can people get Ann Richards? I'm not okay with that.
I don't even understand. I can't comprehend.
You know, I've talked to millennials here at my apartment complex. They have no idea what it is.
Well, it's because we don't teach anything in our public schools. I mean, it's just a giant babysitting service, and a very expensive one, by the way.
Yeah.
Like you said,
my property taxes are killing me.
Oh, I'll bet.
He's a high school.
I'll bet.
I have to say that is.
Yeah, the taxes are unbelievable here. So okay, so we had a bill come up.
Okay, so here's what happens then. So there was this guy named Tom DeLay. He was the Republican whip for the House, the U.S. House.
Isn't it indictment?
Yeah. He ended up in all sorts of trouble, but it's okay because didn't Trump pardon him? I thought
No.
Trump pardoned him.
No, not that I know. No, I think that would have been a huge deal.
Yeah, I feel like Trump pardoned Tom. Anyway, we can look it up later. So Tom DeLay jumps on an airplane, right? Because his office isn't in Austin, it's in DC.
What year?
It's 2003. He jumps on an airplane while the Texas legislature is in session, flies to Austin. He's out of his jurisdiction. He's a U.S. representative, not a Texas rep. He's from Texas representing the U.S. in D.C., right? That's how you should think of it. Anyway, so he flies to Austin and he talks to the Republicans. He goes, redistrict again. And they go, can we? He goes, oh, who cares? Just do it. What are you going to lose? And they go, why are we redistricting? He goes, because I want you to redistrict the U.S. House seats from Texas. because they were 17 Democratic seats and 15 Republican seats. And he thinks that they can redistrict in such a way that they'll make it 11 Democratic seats and 21 Republican seats. They'll flip it from slightly pro-Democratic to overwhelmingly pro-Republican. He talks them into it. So they create the bill. They're ready to pass it. The Democrats in the House flee the state. They go to Albuquerque and they get in a hotel room or hotel rooms and they just hang out. The reason why they do this is Texas requires a quorum to pass a bill in both houses. A quorum is defined as 2/3. So the Texas House at the time was 88 Republicans, 62 Democrats. To have 2/3 of 150 people, you require 100. In other words, 12 of the Democrats need to be present in the building. They don't have to be in the House chamber. They don't have to be in their office. They just need to be in the building somewhere. So they could be in the bathroom, they could be in the lobby. They just need to be somewhere in the Capitol building. So all the Democrats had to do to kill the bill was leave the state. So they did. They actually technically just needed to leave the building, but
they wanted.
they needed to be safe, so they fled. And you're going to see why in a moment. So then Governor Rick Perry calls for a 30-day special session. His thinking is they can't leave the state for 30 days. So the Democrats from the House flee the state again for 30 days this time. And they go to Albuquerque for 30 days. And they wait for the 30-day special session.
What an awesome place to go to.
Yeah. It's a Perry's furious, like he's gnashing his teeth and bleeding from the eyes. So the next year, 2004, early in the year, he does another 30-day special session. He figures he's just going to wear the Democrats out because they'll run out of. For those of you who don't know, the Texas legislature is paid about $20,000 a year. There's the actual salary, and then there's all the stipend stuff. Who can live on $20,000 a year in Austin?
Nobody. That's the stupidest thing to threaten anyone.
$10 an hour. Right? Like, I mean, it's barely better than minimum wage.
Yeah. And most
realtors, business owners.
Exactly. You have to be an attorney or a realtor to be a legislator.
Or a business owner.
Or a business owner. Yeah.
And that's what they are.
And that's what they are. 50% of the Texas legislature is attorneys.
I think all of our city council in Austin is. Yeah.
I mean, basically we've created we've made
now that we got rid of that one guy.
Unscrupulous people in the country will become our leaders. So these Democrats.
There are some good attorneys.
There are some amazing attorneys. There's even some amazing politicians. They're just really rare.
Yeah.
So it's like snowflakes in Texas. It happens.
Yeah.
Not a bunch.
Sometimes it happens and 700 of us die.
Yeah, 750. Yeah.
Just putting a plug for the Lawyers Guild. They've gotten us out of jail a few times.
Hey man,
attorneys.
I love my attorneys.
Craig Moore's an awesome one. I love Craig Moore. He's in Austin.
I have a couple and I like them very much.
So
you have.
And for the record, I know a representative and I know a senator. So you know what I mean. Like this is me taking jabs at a population.
Absolutely.
I'm linked into. They go to Albuquerque, they hang out for 30 days, they come back. Greg Abbott in spring of 2004 does another 30-day special session. Apparently, Greg Abbott forgot that there was another legislative body because that time, so there are 31 senators in Texas. Don't ask me how we got that number. I have no idea. So 2/3 would be 21, right? Because you can't have a fraction of a person. So it has to go to 21. So there were 11 Democrats and 20 Republicans. So the Republicans need one Democrat present. All 11 Democrats fly to Oklahoma City. Apparently, Greg Abbott forgot there were other states too, because he had ordered Texas state troops on the Texas-New Mexico border and looking for representatives fleeing out of Austin Bergstrom Airport. And anyway, the Senate led to the.
Wait, what could they do?
So I'm going to tell you. So before the senators fled, and I'm sure the representatives did this too, I'm just unaware. They had their families go live with friends, right? Because this is before Facebook, so you wouldn't, there was no fear that the family members would post, "Oh, I'm living at my friend's house," and you couldn't do relatives because they would be too easy to track. So it had to be friends. And then they can't drive their own cars, so they also have to borrow their friends' cars. So Greg Abbott ordered Texas state troopers to hunt down and find the family members of the senators. And so there was a state trooper parked outside of middle school, because that's what they realized. The kids are still going to have to go to school. So the state trooper parked outside of middle school waiting. He's just looking for somebody who's acting suspicious. Sure enough, a kid pops his head out like around the corner with sunglasses. And he's like, that's odd. You know, what 8th grader pops their head around the corner with sunglasses looking? And an SUV pulls up with tinted windows. The driver's side, the passenger side door pops open. The kid is sprinting across, and he dives in and pulls the door closed, and the SUV drives away. And because they were playing James Bond, the cop goes, that's gotta be them. He hits his lights, pulls them over, IDs the driver. It's the spouse of one of the senators. He arrests the spouse and the kid.
How can they arrest them?
Yeah.
On what
The law?
grounds?
You don't need grounds. Habeas corpus is 24 hours.
Oh God.
Anybody can be detained anytime
Oh, yeah,
by
that's
the
right.
authorities for 24 hours. Like if they wanted to make your life miserable,
That's right.
24-hour periods and then letting you go. Anyway, so they arrest the family. Now the senator has two options.
I would sue
Headlines
so
in
hard.
American Statesman. Headline A, senator stays in plush hotel in Oklahoma City while child and spouse remain in jail. That's the end of that guy's political career, right? That's, you don't survive.
All right.
B, senator arrested upon arriving in Bergstrom Airport. And he chose B because that's the right thing to do if you care about your political career. So when he deplanes and he's in the terminal and state troopers are waiting for him, they arrest him, they handcuff him, they take him to the squad car, they shove him into the back seat, they drive to the Capitol building, they pull him out, they walk him into the Capitol building to right in front of the metal detectors. They have any, I don't know why we have metal detectors when you can carry a gun. Anyway, all right. What, are you worried about knives? Oh my God, what if a knife got into the Capitol building?
Bombs, I think.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay, make your bombs out of plastic. So they get him into the place right in front of the metal detectors. They call the Senate chamber and they go, he's in the building. Now there's 21 senators in the building. The 20 Republicans in the Senate chamber call in the session, they vote, they pass. And that's how we got the gerrymandered districts that we ended up with in just in time for the November.
So they pulled it off. It was very self-interested and they were able to pull it off.
And that is a great example of self-interested in pulling it off.
Well,
Yeah.
they pulled it and they think they can keep doing the same shenanigans.
So
They
for
are
the
pulling.
record, they
Can't
flipped
they?
districts, and then the Supreme
Yeah.
Court ruled one of them was inappropriately flipped and made them change it. So the net gain was 5 districts.
Mm-hmm.
So when the Democrats walked away a few weeks ago and killed that bill that would have created the restrictive measures, all that Greg Abbott has to do is call a 30-day special session, but then the
He already
Democrats
did.
are gonna have to flee the state. And
He
he's announced
already
he's
did.
going to do 2 sessions. So one of them will almost certainly be for that.
You know how much one session, extra special session costs? $1 million.
Oh, that seems reasonable.
That's nothing. That's nothing to these folks.
Yeah, I know. But
Our money.
I know it's nothing to these
It's
folks.
money they could have spent on the electrical grid, but
Oh,
what would
yeah.
that have done? Helped one neighborhood? So, I mean, for me,
Can't
the
spend money on that.
crazy of the session that just ended was we go through this blistering winter that kills 750 people and came 37 seconds from complete crash of the electrical grid that would have taken the electrical grid out for somewhere between 6 weeks to 6 months. And not a single piece of legislation was passed to reinforce the electrical grid. And then now we're having a summer crisis because there's no work being done on the electrical grid.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not honestly as a citizen of Texas, I'm on City of Austin, so I don't have to fuck around with that ERCOT stuff, which I don't know if other cities have that. I mean, does City of Houston have their own? I mean, I know they get it from ERCOT still, but then they spit it out to us as a monthly instead of some kind of, you hope it doesn't get too hot this summer gamble.
So
Isn't that how that works?
So ERCOT manages the amount of supply for the part of the state that's off the grid of the rest of the United States. The problem,
Which includes us.
which is the majority of the state. The problem is, of course, when there isn't enough supply because ERCOT didn't plan for, let's say, a cold winter or a hot summer, then because they didn't make sure that there was enough gas moving and enough coal moving for a state that's completely reliant on those two materials. What ends up happening then is ERCOT says there's only this much and distributes it. And so it doesn't matter who you are, if you're in that part of Texas, you're going to be affected by it. The question is, do you have a utility company that's going to gouge you? Or do you have a utility company that has basically fixed prices? And Austin Energy is fixed price. If you're in the rural parts of Texas, the Republican parts of Texas, you will be completely gouged, which is the hilarity.
That's right.
People who are suffering the most.
When we lost power, yeah, all these people were talking about these $9,000 bills. And I was like, first of all, how did you keep getting electricity that it would go up to $9,000? And my bill was $29 that month. I mean, I went for 4 days without electricity, but I would have assumed that other people had too. And that's why their bills would not have been $9,000. So I'm still I don't understand how they got away with it, I guess.
So to build on what Susie was saying, I want to bring us back to the original question, which was, are politicians in the United States, whether in Texas or Republicans or even Democrats in general, are they still playing realpolitik, which is the pragmatic sort of, let's do what we need to do with an eye to the present and the future, or has the game changed? And it, just by that very wonderful description of this example of the Texas representatives fleeing, but not being able to actually be effective, the Democrats be effective. This tells me the Republicans it is still realpolitik to me.
But that was 15 years ago, or more than that now, 17 years ago.
So what's going to happen now? The same thing. I think we came to the conclusion that, well, they're going to start fleeing again, but then what?
Okay, so the voter suppression bill is rational because, yes, it does take away the ability of people to vote the Republicans out of office. I'm not denying that. It's all the other stuff that they've done that's irrational. You're gonna attack the First Amendment by purging conversations about race and sexism in the classroom. You're going to attack
That's just
abortion.
Putting their base into a frenzy to support them.
Right. The problem with doing that is you have to show results eventually. For example, we're going to now Greg Abbott is saying he's going to build the border wall. That's going to be catastrophic for South Texas. First of all, so much of South Texas' economy is linked to Mexico. But then second of all, where are you going to put the wall? You can't put it in the river, so you're going to have to put it on land. So there's all these farmers who have land along the Rio Grande who are going to have their land cut off because there's going to be a wall that they can't get over.
This actually makes me think of something really interesting. Trump said he was going to build a wall forever. Turns out it was mostly rhetoric.
Yeah, he built he expanded the wall by 1%.
Yeah.
Most of the wall he built was he tore down Obama's existing wall and then rebuilt it.
So is this basically branding? Is this what they're kind of scaffolding their branding?
So
is what they're doing.
For Trump, I think he was full of shit, right? He didn't care whether a wall was built or not.
Yeah.
The problem is when you talk and you create this rhetoric, your voters start to believe it. And that forces the politicians then to start to deliver. So in other words, we're going to do X, but you don't mean it. You're just a cynical person. But then 10 years later, 20 years later, you find yourself doing X because enough people have drunk the Kool-Aid that if you don't deliver, you won't get elected to office.
Which is maybe what's happening with gun control, right? Like, I don't think anyone 20 years ago actually wanted this level of unabashed open gun ownership, but then frenzy people up, rhetoric around it, all of this, ratchet it up every 5 years, and here we are.
I mean, yeah, and how many guns do people own? Like, how many do you need? A handgun and a rifle, and then you're done. But then you open up the storage inside their house, this special robe just for their
Roy, yeah.
weapons.
It's because we're gearing up for war. We are on the frontier and we're gearing up for war. We can feel a cold civil war fermenting, brewing, whatever you want to call it.
What is
People
going to
are
be the life expectancy of the average civil war for the next civil war soldier? What is it, 10 minutes on the battlefield? I mean, like, you still only need 2 weapons at most.
You're not going to the battlefield. You're sitting at home protecting your private property.
Yeah. Until one side gets hold of nukes.
That's right. That's right.
Well,
Yes.
it's a
Don't
cyber
get
war.
my
Well, you have all the
TV.
yeah, you
You
have all
better
the
not
guns and
take
things,
my
but it's a
Xbox.
cyber war.
It's the
Exactly,
looters coming after
exactly.
my plasma TV. Oh.
Well, I mean, okay, so but you guys, I mean, it's with the heat coming up too, and all of these guns, and we've already had how many mass shootings since the restrictions have been marginally lifted?
The last time
I
I
mean-
checked, it was like 2 weeks ago, and it was 270. We've already had 270 mass shootings in the United States.
But have these been a result of because they've been kind of mixed, right? These results have been mixed. Like the last one that happened in Austin a few weeks ago, or was it last week? A few weeks ago?
Yeah,
It was like
it was a week
two
ago. I mean, 2
kids,
weeks
two
ago.
kids. I think one from Colleen having a shootout, and then people getting shot. You know what I mean? So this had nothing to do with political or civil war. So it's I wonder how many are versus civil war.
Oh,
versus how many are just dumb people being dumb. Well, both
I
of them are
don't
dumb.
think-
Both are dumb, but I mean, you know what I mean.
I think the majority of them I've heard about don't have anything to, I mean, have
Mhm.
little to do with politics. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
there are some, and that's
Yeah.
just going to get more and more, it's just, we're all doomed in this fucking state with these guns. Do you think
We
America
don't know
will
what's
go,
gonna happen.
go?
Where, when, where, what's gonna happen, when, wherever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
That's
yeah,
right.
freaky. It's freaky. Uh-huh.
So that's something to look, not knowing is something to look forward to this week.
Uh-huh.
Well, on that note.
Yeah. Be safe out there, people, because the show is,
There's
I guess, at a
there's
rest.
the guns.
There's the hot people with guns.
Uh-huh.
Only in Texas could you laugh about all this.
Man.
You have to laugh.
What you gonna do?
You almost have to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Laugh at absurd. That's what I like to
The
do.
other option is drink and cry yourself to sleep.
Well, we do that too.
I
That's
don't
after
drink,
hours,
but I do-
Roy.
Dang.
It's only what time?
Laugh until you drink, and then start crying.
Oh, God.
Man. Alrighty.
On that,
So, yeah, on that note, you guys, y'all have a great rest of the weekend. Any closing words for y'all, from y'all? Anyone closing?
Good luck.
Good luck.
something to look out for. It does look like we've bottomed out on the COVID plunge because we just had our 4th global spike, and it looks like we might be at the front end of our 5th global.
Yeah.
So that's exciting.
Front end of what now?
So COVID, we've had, like, if you look at each place, they've had multiple spikes. Some places have had fewer, some places have more. Globally, there have basically been 4 COVID spikes. The last one, of course, was fueled by India's numbers. But right now, Brazil, Germany, and Great Britain look like they're taking off. Well, Brazil has been taking off, but Britain and Germany look like they're starting to come back up. And the reason, of course, is that the new variant, Delta, is more contagious and more deadly, and it's burning through the population a little bit faster. So, if you're so inclined and you haven't gotten vaccinated, you maybe want to start thinking about it.
Do we even know if it works on that variant?
Yes, I was wondering as well. It does.
Yeah,
Okay.
so far the data shows that both Pfizer and Moderna do seem to be doing pretty good with the Delta variant. I don't know about AstraZeneca, but AstraZeneca did not do well with the UK variant. And then I haven't seen any data on Johnson & Johnson. But if you've been vaccinated with Johnson & Johnson, go get Moderna.
Yeah.
It's not going to hurt you. And I mean, well, except for the fact that you'll become magnetic and spoons will stick to your forehead.
And when you're slightly sweaty, things will stick to you.
And by the way, if you're worried about the government tracking you, why do you have a cell phone? Why do you have a
Thank
Facebook?
you.
Why do you have a
Thank
Twitter?
you.
On that note, I just want to, I am thankful for Juneteenth becoming official, a federal.
Yes.
Me too.
Wait a minute, but also on top of that, for having so many Black folks in positions of power who are holding the other people in positions of power's feet to the fire.
And
Things are better.
things are
Things
better.
are better. We
And-
have more people in positions of power.
And to put the numbers behind it, 12% of the US House is Black. Blacks are 13.5% of the US population. For a minority to be that well represented in single member district representation is amazing. It's a miracle, and it proves that the Black population in the United States is extraordinarily resourceful, wise, experienced, and brilliant. And I just
So
want
here's what we need.
So we
Here's
have-
what we need, though. Here's what we need, though.
Wait,
I
what'd
love
you
it.
say, Roy?
I love it. I love it. But here's what we need, though. We need folks. We need these Black folks, and we need everyone to come together and fight for these bills. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Don't. I mean, we do need force to vote. We need stuff like force to vote. We need stuff like push for Medicare for all. We need these Black folks to band together and fight.
And band
it's great that
together.
they're there, but I
And
want to
band
fight.
together.
For too, not just Black folks, but
Yeah, all of
everybody.
us.
Everybody.
and everybody. Yeah, absolutely.
LGBTQ.
Yes. All right. I see
All
that
right, I guess that's
the
it.
kids are like,
Hey,
done.
Roro,
Roro,
come here.
Look,
Look, there's Lando.
look at
Lando, say hi to Lando.
Say hi to Lando.
Faded into the background.
All right, y'all.
All right, yeah.
Next
Y'all
week.
enjoy your rest of the day. Have a good
Yeah.
weekend. We'll see y'all later.
Bye.
Bye.